Her SUV didn't just park on my lawn, it colonized it. Like it paid rent, planted a flag, and declared independence. By the fifth time, it wasn't a car anymore. It was a full-blown HOA land invasion. So I did what any reasonable man would do. I turned my grass into a biological trap. She called it sabotage. I call it landscaping with consequences. It started like most of my mornings do, me in pajama pants, pouring hot coffee into a chip mug that says, "I break for books," and staring out my kitchen window at 12 feet of perfectly trimmed grass I call my pride and joy. That's not sarcasm. That strip of green bordering my driveway and running up to the old oak is mine, legally mine, registered, mapped, and surveyed. It may not be much, but in Dry Ridge, Kentucky, where HOA lines are drawn tighter than church budgets, 12 feet of grass is practically sacred ground. And then came the sound. A low, entitled rumble, the kind of engine growl that makes squirrels run and neighbors sigh. I knew that sound. Karen's tank on wheels, a gleaming white SUV that looked like it ate Priuses for breakfast, was coming in hot. I sipped my coffee and stepped onto my porch just in time to see her behemoth of a vehicle swinging wide around the corner and gliding up like it owned the place. Both driver's side tires landed smack in the middle of my lawn, crushing blades I'd cut just 2 days ago. The soil groaned, the grass bent, my eyes twitched. Karen stepped out, flipping her sunglasses onto her head like she was walking onto a film set. She adjusted her power blazer, yes, she wears blazers, at 8 a.m., and tapped away on her phone like this was just another Tuesday. No nod, no wave, not even the courtesy of pretending she didn't see me. Her heels sunk slightly into the turf, but she didn't flinch. That's the kind of confidence only HOA royalty could muster. I cleared my throat. "Morning, Karen." She glanced over, gave a thin smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Luke, hope you don't mind. I had my dog groomer coming and needed the extra room." I gestured very slowly toward her completely empty driveway across the street, 4 cars long and untouched. She didn't even bother looking. "She doesn't like tight angles," she added, referencing her dog groomer like she was some kind of professional rally driver. I stood there in disbelief. "Karen, that's actually my yard." She tilted her head, frowning like I just spoke Latin. "Oh, Luke, don't be so territorial. It's just grass. Besides, that little patch, technically it's community overflow. You should be proud of your land being put to use." She patted the SUV affectionately like it was a rescue pet, then walked away, leaving my grass looking like it lost a bar fight. I watched her strut across the street, humming something cheerful, probably the theme song of gentrification. I looked back at my yard, my line, my lawn, my property, and something snapped in a quiet, unshakable way. She said it was trespassing. It was community overflow. And right then, standing in my bathrobe, coffee going cold, I realized if she thought that patch was free real estate, maybe it was time nature started charging rent. I thought that morning would be the worst of it. I truly did. A one-time lapse in judgment, a brief lapse in spatial awareness. Maybe she'd apologize or at the very least stop, but like a weed fed by passive-aggressive sunshine, Karen's behavior only grew bolder. The very next day, her SUV was back. Same spot, same indifference, only this time, she didn't even get out. Her dog groomer walked to her instead. By the end of the week, it wasn't just Karen's tires claiming my lawn like manifest destiny. It was her yoga instructor, her landscaper, her bridge group, and I'm not making this up, her cousin's catering van. I started keeping count like it was some deranged scavenger hunt. Day 3, meet 2 vehicles. Day 6, then 3, plus a delivery truck with Pet Spa Express painted on the side. Day 10, 5 SUVs lined up like they were waiting to charge the Capitol. My 12-foot patch of private grass had been transformed into a suburban valet lot. I tried talking to her again, more than once. She'd always laugh, head tilted, condescending smile locked and loaded. "You should be thankful, Luke," she said one afternoon while sipping a turmeric latte on her porch. "This patch finally has a purpose." The word purpose dangled in the air like a punchline that only she found funny. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I contacted the HOA. I submitted a formal complaint with photos, property records, and a printed copy of the town's zoning map. I even included a Google Street View screenshot from before she moved in, back when my grass still looked like grass, not a war zone. The response, a 2-sentence email from the HOA secretary that said, The shared nature of visual community space must be approached with flexibility. Vice President Glenn Shaw has reviewed the complaint and determined no action is required at this time. That's right. Karen Glenshaw, my lawn invader, and HOA vice president were one and the same. And let me tell you, when a HOA board member decides the rules don't apply to her, things get creative fast. I found laminated flyers in my mailbox about a temporary event overflow zone marked, you guessed it, right on my yard. One of the flyers had a map with my grass shaded in yellow titled Designated Event Buffer, Non-Permanent Use Only. It was labeled like some sort of UN demilitarized zone for minivans and labradoodles. I confronted her again, this time with the flyer in hand. She didn't even pretend to be surprised. It's within the bounds of board discretion, she said, her voice syrupy sweet. I'm sure the community will appreciate your cooperation. Then came the Saturday. I remember it because the mailman stopped in front of my house, took one look at the chaos, and drove away. 5 vehicles lined up on my grass. A woman in heels used my porch steps like they were part of a hotel lobby. Some kid dropped a popsicle stick on my driveway and just left it there. Karen's house was full of noise, laughter, clinking glasses, someone loudly debating essential oils. When I tried to talk to one of the guests, a man in a linen shirt holding a wine spritzer said, "Oh, are you valet?" I almost bit through my tongue. I went back inside and sat on my couch and stared out the window at my overrun lawn. I had a choice: keep sending emails that vanish into HOA oblivion, or do something different, something not illegal, just memorable. That night, I pulled out an old garage notebook and flipped to a fresh page. At the top, I wrote in block letters, Operation Reclamation. And beneath it, in slightly smaller writing, let's see how she likes landscaping with teeth. Operation Reclamation didn't start with glue or seeds or vengeance. It started with diplomacy, or at least my painfully optimistic attempt at it. I figured maybe if Karen saw things spelled out clearly enough, she'd finally understand that I wasn't being petty. I was being patient. Too patient, probably. So I printed out a map, a real full-color property line map from the county assessor's website, complete with highlighted borders and little red arrows pointing to my yard like it was the scene of a crime. I laminated it, tacked it to a stake, planted that stake right on the edge of the grass with a bright orange flag next to it, just in case she was nearsighted. Next to the map, I posted a sign, Private grass, Hother, has no claim. Trespassing vehicles will be memento. Polite, firm, legally accurate. I even added a QR code that linked to the zoning records. For 3 days, it stood there like a proud little protest, a lone voice of sanity in a world of crossover SUVs. On the 4th day, I walked out with my coffee and found the map crumpled under a tire, the flag trampled into the dirt, and the sign split in half like someone had stomped it in a rage. I didn't need security footage to guess who. Karen didn't just ignore my message, she launched a counteroffensive. The next day, I found a printed letter from the HOA taped to my mailbox. It had a tearful header, a terrible font, and the passive-aggressive venom of a suburban sitcom villain. It read, "Dear resident, your recent display of unsanctioned signage and use of disruptive boundary markers has been found in violation of Article 7B, Visual Harmony Clause. As such, you are requested to remove any non-approved decorative or messaging items within 48 hours. It ended with a note from Vice President Glenshaw about how my actions were visually divisive to the community aesthetic. I couldn't believe it. She'd vandalized my stuff, stood on my land, and somehow managed to flip the narrative like she was the victim of blonde terrorism. And now I was being threatened with fines for defending my own yard. The HOA wanted me to believe that Karen's SUV didn't disrupt the visual harmony, but my laminated map did. I removed the sign, mostly because I didn't want to give them another excuse, but I left the little orange flags up. They weren't signage, they were landscaping, my version of a topiary protest. A few days later, a delivery driver parked half on, half off the grass. I walked outside, pointed to the flags, and asked him to move. He shrugged and said, "Lady across the street said it was her overflow spot." Overflow spot, like my lawn was a storm drain. That night, I opened my notebook again and flipped past the title page of Operation Reclamation. I started sketching ideas, not out of anger, at least not just that. But out of a growing need for a solution Karen couldn't twist, deny, or have reversed by her HOA throne. That's when I stumbled across something online, a forum post from a gardening enthusiast in Oregon talking about organic adhesives, natural compounds made from tree sap and seaweed, sticky, strong, biodegradable, and most importantly, legal. As I scrolled through photos of moss-covered fences and living sculptures, a plan started to form. Something clever, something passive-aggressive in the most literal sense. Karen wanted overflow. Maybe it was time she experienced a little runoff of her own. The post about organic adhesive wouldn't leave my brain. It was like the seed of an idea, no pun intended, that kept sprouting every time I passed my mango lawn or saw a fresh tire track carving through it. I started researching late into the night, surrounded by tabs titled things like biodegradable glues, fast germinating clover, and legal property deterrents. My YouTube recommendations became a mix of gardening hacks, composting science, and DIY pest control. I wasn't looking for destruction. I wanted something poetic. Something that would stick to her ego the way her SUV stuck to my patience. After a week of reading, I started testing. Turns out nature is surprisingly cooperative when you give it a little chemistry. I began mixing up a blend in my garage. Part plant-based glue, part seed accelerator, part good old backyard pettiness. The base was a sticky gel made from agar and xanthan with added enzymes from decayed kelp to keep it moist long enough for root penetration. I threw in a fast-growing mix of clover, creeping thyme, and a particularly aggressive variety of micrograss I found at a discount nursery that promised visible sprouting in 48 hours or less. My garage looked like a mad botanist's bunker. There were car doors propped against sawhorses, panels of painted aluminum smeared with goop, and solo cups full of different seed blends labeled Batch A Spicy, Batch B Bachelor Sticky AF, and Batch C God Help Us All. The smell was a mix of mulch, moss, and vengeance. I kept a detailed log of adhesion strength, dry times, and germination speed. Some failed entirely. Batch D basically became salad dressing, but others worked like magic. I almost felt like I was back in school, quivering like a barbecue bear after a bite. But Bat B basically became salad dressing, but others worked like magic. Within a day, tiny green fuzz started poking out of the dried gel. After a week, it was like each panel was being reclaimed by nature. I called it Project Chia Justice. It had a ring to it. Every proper revenge needs branding, after all. The idea wasn't just to trap her car, it was to make a statement, to let the land speak back. I wasn't breaking anything. I wasn't even touching her property. I was simply enhancing mine, with intention, with science, and with plants that had sharper boundaries than Karen ever would. Timing, though, was everything. I needed the right moment. The kind of moment when Karen wouldn't hesitate, wouldn't think, would just swing her SUV right back into her overflow zone without a second glance. And then fate handed me a gift. A glossy flyer taped to every mailbox in the neighborhood. Sunset soiree at the Glenshaw residence. Wine, ore stores, HOA networking. It was scheduled for Saturday evening. RSVPs were required. Valet was not mentioned. I knew what that meant. My lawn would once again become her unofficial red carpet. So I spent Friday night in my garage, loading the final version of my concoction into a pump sprayer I'd modified to mist a thick layer across the lawn. It looked like alien mucus, shiny, greenish-brown, faintly sweet-smelling. I double-checked the weather, clear skies, the wind, low, and the HOA bylaws, no mention of landscaping adhesives. Around midnight, I walked out to the edge of my yard and began spraying in slow, even rows, a foot-wide strip of sticky justice across my entire patch. To the untrained eye, it just looked damp. But I knew better, and by tomorrow night, so would Karen. By the time I'd finished spraying, the yard looked like it had just been kissed by dew. Harmless, innocent, deceptively organic. The gel had settled into a smooth, barely visible coat across the entire 12-foot strip. It shimmered faintly under the moonlight like a lake of molasses with ambition. I stood at the edge with the empty sprayer in hand, admiring my work. It was silent, still, waiting. It's like nature holding its breath. Saturday afternoon came with all the smugness a suburban HOA gathering could muster. Karen's house buzzed with catered trays, folding tables draped in pastel linen, and the unmistakable scent of artificially cheerful candles. Her lawn, as usual, was pristine, not a leaf out of place. Guests in khaki slacks and chunky necklaces milled about with wine glasses like they were at a vineyard, not 50 feet from my garage. I kept an eye out through the blinds, waiting. Sure enough, around 5:38 p.m., Karen's SUV roared back onto the scene. She was late. Judging by the speed she took the corner, she was also flustered, probably forgot the name tags. She didn't hesitate. She didn't look. She aimed that beast of a vehicle right across the street and drove straight into her favorite parking spot, my lawn. There was a brief moment, maybe 2 seconds, where the tires rolled over the grass and I could tell something clicked. Then came the sound, a thick, wet slurp followed by a sudden mechanical whine, then silence. The door wouldn't open. Karen tried again. I watched her yank on the handle, then try the passenger side. Nothing. Her car, her shiny, pearl white, executive class SUV, was fused to my lawn like it had been swallowed whole by the earth. I walked out onto the porch slowly, coffee mug in hand, slipper still on. I sipped. She saw me and immediately exploded into a flurry of arm flailing and yelling through her barely cracked window. What is this? What did you do to my car? I raised my mug politely. Having parking issues? She shoved her door again, hard enough to make the whole vehicle rock. No dice. The gel had hardened overnight into a semi-flexible adhesive, and now, under the warmth of the sun, the first little sprouts of clover and thyme had begun poking through. They grew fast, designed to. The green fuzz climbed from the wheels up to the door frame like a time lapse from a National Geographic documentary. Karen screamed again, something between a banshee and a soccer mom denied a refund. You glued my car to the ground, she shrieked. Actually, I said calmly, I improved the soil's resilience with a sustainable gel-based substrate for invasive vehicle mitigation. What does that even mean? She shrieked again, now frantically dabbing at the door with a tissue like it would do anything. This is illegal. I shrugged. You're parked on private property. Landscaping measures were already in place. Can't help what sticks. I paused and added with a friendly nod. It's kind of poetic if you think about it. She stomped her foot, which slipped slightly on the edge of the green, slick curb, and let out a guttural groan. Her phone was already at her ear. I assumed 911 was on the line. I took another sip of coffee and leaned against the porch railing. The gel wasn't going anywhere. The car wasn't going anywhere. And by the looks of things, neither was Karen's dignity. But I wasn't done watching yet, because if you think Karen's worst moment was getting glued to my yard, well, wait till you see what happens when the cops show up and the law doesn't bend to HOA royalty. Karen's scream reached operatic levels as I leaned casually on my porch railing, sipping lukewarm coffee like it was bourbon on a porch swing in July. She paced around the SUV, waving her arms like she was guiding air traffic. Her phone was clutched to her ear, and from her shrieking tone, you'd think I'd launched a biological weapon. Yes, I need police immediately. My vehicle has been glued. Yes, glued to the earth. It's an attack on private property. A landscape. She paused to shoot me the dirtiest look imaginable. He's standing there smiling about it. About 20 minutes later, the blue and white arrived, one cruiser, lights off, but you could tell by the slow crawl up the street they were bracing themselves for something weird. The first officer out looked like he was still new enough to care. The second, Sergeant DeWitt, had the kind of face that said he'd rather be fishing or diffusing a hostage situation. Anything but HOA drama. Karen was on him before his boots hit pavement. This man has vandalized my property. He created some sort of eco-glue monster trap and attacked my car. DeWitt gave me a long, tired glance. I gave a polite wave. She parked on my lawn, I said. Again, I simply treated my grass with an organic anti-trespass solution. Completely biodegradable, enhances soil health. I handed him the folder. Laminated printouts of the property map. Seed mix receipts, a full list of materials, and my tax parcel number with the boundary highlighted in neon. He flipped through the documents like a teacher grading a perfect test. You do this often? He asked, eyebrow raised. Just the once, I said. Nature's got boundaries, too. Before the officers could say more, another SUV rolled up, this one black with a cheap HOA magnet slapped on the side. 3 members stepped out, led by Janet Marsh, treasurer and longtime HOA fence sitter. Karen practically melted with joy. Finally, thank God, you need to write him up. This is a disgrace to the neighborhood. Janet didn't answer right away. She looked at the sprouting car, the angry green fuzz crawling up its side. Then she looked at me. You did all this with plants? And some glue, I said. Mostly plants. To everyone's surprise, Janet turned toward Karen. Did you inform the board about charging for tonight's event? Karen blinked. What? The flyer says donations accepted, Janet continued. HOA bylaws prohibit private functions with outside guests unless filed as a community event with prior approval. And she added, her voice going dry, your guests are parked off HOA property, which is also a violation. Karen's face did something special, like a Botox volcano caught off guard. This is my house, she barked. You think I need approval to have a few people over? Not a few, Janet replied, flipping through a stack of photos. Screenshots from neighbors' doorbell cams showing at least 30 attendees, cars blocking driveways, and Karen giving someone a cash envelope by the shrubbery. And not just friends. This is a commercial violation. DeWitt stepped in then, tone neutral, but laced with finality. Far as the police are concerned, he said, there's no criminal action here. This man's jail, while creative, was applied to his property. Your vehicle is technically trespassing. Karen went silent. You could see the gears turning, grinding against entitlement and ego. Janet sealed the moment with a quiet, devastating line. As of now, Vice President Glenshaw, you're suspended from the board pending review. The HOA will be in touch. Karen sputtered, opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her voice had finally run out of excuses. But I had a feeling she wasn't done scheming. People like Karen don't just walk away. They regroup, recalculate. And based on the furious tapping she was now doing on her phone, I knew something was brewing. I just didn't know yet how weird it was going to get. By the time Karen stormed back across the street, phone still glued to her hand instead of her car, I already had the folder prepped. Days earlier, I'd started building a case. Photos of every instance her SUV or her guest vehicles had claimed my lawn, screenshots of text threads with the HOA, and a timeline that looked less like a petty neighbor squabble and more like a legal drama's exhibit list. I dropped the full packet into a manila envelope and walked it over to Janet Marsh's house the next morning, fresh coffee in one hand, HOA policy binder in the other. Janet answered in slippers and a live, laugh, laugh, file a complaint t-shirt. You came prepared, she said, not even trying to hide the smirk. I handed her the envelope, just making sure the next vote is an informed one. She flipped through a few pages, eyes scanning a shot of Karen's catering van, half on my lawn, half blocking a fire hydrant. We'll be scheduling a special session, she said. You should probably show up. And show up I did. The HOA meeting was held in the community clubhouse, which smelled, as always, like lemon cleaner and passive aggression. The board sat up front like a panel of suburban judges, and the room filled up faster than usual. Word had spread, people were curious. A few neighbors I hadn't talked to in months nodded at me like I was walking into a courtroom with a smoking gun. Karen arrived 10 minutes late, dramatically as ever, draped in a bright red blazer like she was about to do a TED Talk on being misunderstood. She tried to take her usual seat at the board table, only to be gently redirected to the folding chairs with the rest of us mere mortals. That alone was worth showing up for. The meeting lasted exactly 47 minutes. Janet led with the rule book, reading directly from the HOA charter. Another member read off the list of documented infractions: unauthorized use of non-HOA property for events, repeated trespass despite warnings, and false signage. When they asked if anyone wanted to speak, I stood, handed out copies of the photo timeline, and calmly explained that my lawn was not a communal donation box for oversized vehicles. Karen had one last attempt at drama in her. She stood, voice quivering with righteous fury, and said, "This is a coordinated attack on my position. I've given my time, my energy, and my resources to this community, and I am being punished for being popular." The room was dead silent for a beat, and then someone in the back actually laughed. The board called for a vote, 5-1 in favor. Karen was officially out. But the real cherry on top, the next day, someone, possibly Janet, possibly fate, taped a laminated sign onto the driver's side window of her still-stuck SUV. It read, "Under environmental treatment, do not tow without permit." Karen had tried to call 3 different tow companies, but none would touch the car without a proper release from environmental services due to active plant growth on and around the vehicle. Bureaucracy, my old friend, had finally become a weapon of poetic justice. And boy, did that car transform. With every sunny day, the clover got denser. Wild grass shot up between the wheel wells. Some kind of flowering vine began crawling up the mirrors. The whole thing looked like a garden sculpture gone rogue. Part vehicle, part chia pet, part silent middle finger from Mother Nature. Kids started calling it the Carden. Tourists, or at least the neighborhood dog walkers, started snapping pictures, but not everyone was laughing, especially not Karen, who hadn't moved the vehicle an inch. And judging by the envelope I found in my mailbox that week, official letterhead, legal tone, she was planning something new. A final play, maybe a lawsuit, maybe worse. Either way, I knew this wasn't over, not yet. The envelope was thick, watermarked, and smelled faintly of printer ink and desperation. Karen's name was printed at the top, complete with her signature flair for dramatic font choices. I opened it slowly, half expecting glitter to fall out as a final act of spite. Instead, it was exactly what I thought. A formal cease and desist, accusing me of public defacement via organic weaponry, emotional distress caused by horticultural sabotage, and my favorite, ecosystem tampering with malicious intent. It was the legal equivalent of throwing a tantrum in cursive. I passed the letter on to a neighbor who happened to be a retired environmental attorney. He read it twice, chuckled once, and said, "This thing's flimsier than a gas station sandwich. If anything, she should be thanking you for soil restoration." Then he leaned back in his chair and added, "But if she's trying to sue her way back into the HOA, I'd get ahead of it." That's exactly what I did. The next HOA meeting was packed. Janet had to bring in extra chairs, and someone made brownies. The board opened with a unanimous vote to instate a new policy, one that would go into effect immediately. No vehicle shall occupy any private parcel not within its own property boundary. Encroachment into designated green spaces is prohibited under the Green Line Ordinance. It was dubbed, unofficially, the Karen Clause. Then Janet stood and read aloud the final statement of the board. The HOA recognizes the recent events not as a dispute, but as a necessary reckoning. Property lines exist for a reason. When respect dies, roots rise. The room actually clapped. And I, for once, didn't feel like a cranky loner yelling about grass. I felt like the voice of chlorophyll justice. That weekend, I carved a wooden sign and drove it into the earth with satisfying precision, just beyond where Karen's tires had once sunk. The sign read, "Private roots run deep. Respect the green." It wasn't flashy. It didn't glow in the dark, but neighbors came by to take pictures with it. And someone even framed it on our community Facebook page with a caption that read, "This lawn won the war." And then came the kids. It started with two of them dragging tiny shovels and a flat of marigolds. "Mom said you're the plant guy," one of them told me. "Can we help?" I nodded, maybe a little too fast. Within an hour, there were 7 more. Digging, planting, giggling. They brought sunflowers, wild daisies, even one confused succulent. Parents waved from sidewalks. Some helped water. By sunset, the entire border of the lawn had become a live, blooming mural. A few of them stuck little handmade flags in the dirt with crayon scrawl messages like "Green rules" and "Nature wins." The car, still stuck, had become the centerpiece of the scene. It looked less like a mistake now and more like an art installation. Vines curled around the mirrors, a bird nested in the rear wiper, and on the back window, someone had etched in dust the words, "She parked, it planted back." By Tuesday, Karen was gone. No big goodbye, no moving truck parade, just silence. Her house went dark and dull, and within days, a "for sale" sign appeared. Angled awkwardly like even the post wanted out. Rumor was she moved to a new HOA upstate. I wish them luck. They're going to need it. Me, I'm still here, still sipping coffee on my porch every morning, still mowing that 12-foot stretch like it's sacred. And yeah, I know it's just grass, but now it's more than that. It's the line where passive aggression met its match, where roots stood up to entitlement, where the neighborhood finally remembered who it belonged to. They say you can't fight HOA politics. I say you just need the right blend of patience, flants, and pettiness, and maybe, just maybe, a little more fertilizer. What did we learn here, folks? Boundaries matter, grass has rights, and sometimes the most effective revenge isn't loud. It grows quietly, roots deep, and blossoms in ways that make tow trucks cry. Karen thought she could park wherever she wanted. Now she's part of a living sculpture called Entitlement in Bloom. So the next time someone tramples your space, physically or metaphorically, don't get mad, get creative, get eco-friendly, maybe even get a little sticky. If you love this tale of suburban warfare, passive-aggressive brilliance, and botanical justice, hit that like button, drop up in the comments, and tell us what would you plant in your revenge garden. And remember, respect the green, or it might just fight back. She parked, it planted back. Yeah, that's staying on a t-shirt.